Hello and welcome, and a very happy 75th Independence Day. On the 5th of August, 2 weeks ago, a team from NewsX and our network, the ITV network, was at Lal Chowk in Srinagar in an iconic ceremony in which we flew the Indian flag and sang the Indian national anthem. Lal Chowk in Srinagar. It takes us back into history. And for me, it is partly a very personal and emotional journey. It was the summer of 2000. I was a young student in class 9, and I was in the Kasauli cantonment in Himachal Pradesh, sitting in the Kasauli club in the foyer, and I was reading this book. This book is called The Making and Unmaking of British India. It's by Lawrence James. And there was an old elderly gentleman with a walking stick walking past me. He was from Mumbai. It seems very recently, but it was 22 years ago. I don't remember his name. And he saw me reading this. He came the next day and gifted me another book. And this is a reprint. The book is called The Integration of the Indian States by V.P. Menon. V.P. Menon, seen here, standing with Sardar Patel, who was the minister of the States Ministry, which no longer exists now, was the key man on the spot in Srinagar in the October of 1947. He is the man who flew in to get the instrument of accession signed. And he writes about it. And I remember as a young teenager reading this. I'm going to read it out. This is page 356 on the chapter on Jammu and Kashmir from V.P. Menon's book. The all-out invasion of Kashmir started on 22nd October 1947. The main raiders column, which had approximately 200 to 300 lorries and which consisted of frontier tribesmen estimated at 5,000, Afridis, Wazirs, Masoods, Swathis and soldiers of the Pakistani army on leave, led by some regular officers who knew Kashmir well, advanced from Abbottabad in the NWFP along the Jhelum Valley Road. They captured Gari and Domal and arrived at the gates of Muzaffarabad. He goes on to write, the raiders then marched towards Baramulla along the road leading to Srinagar, their next destination being Uri. When Brigadier Rajinder Singh, the Chief of Staff of the State Forces, heard of the desertion of the Muslim personnel and the advance of the raiders, he gathered together approximately 150 men and moved towards Uri. There, he engaged the raiders for 2 days and in rearguard action destroyed the Uri bridge. The brigadier himself and all his men were cut to pieces in this action. But he and his colleagues will live in history like the gallant Leonidas and his 300 who held the Persian invaders at Thermopylae. It was but appropriate that when the Mahavir Chakra decoration was instituted, the first award should have been given posthumously to this heroic soldier. This was my very personal introduction one summer more than 2 decades ago, very briefly, to Brigadier Rajinder Singh. Here I am, 22 years later, the editor of a news channel. And I owe it to my generation and generations after me that this story be told and recognized in a whole new light. Had Brigadier Rajinder Singh, and it's difficult to understand this as civilians, when you receive an order to fight to the last bullet and to the last man, what that actually means. Let me read out his Mahavir Chakra citation. At 800 hours on the 22nd of October, a message was received at Army Headquarters J&K SF from OC4 J&K to the effect that Domel camp had been heavily attacked from all sides. There were very few TPS in Srinagar troops. Brigadier Rajinder Singh, who was acting Chief of Staff of the State Forces, took out a contingent of 2 mortar and set from Srinagar about 1800 hours during heavy downpour of rain, reaching Uri by midnight. On morning of 23rd October 47, the contingent was supplemented by 2 sections from 7 JNK and advanced towards Domel. At a place about quarter of a mile short of Gadi, the contingent was heavily engaged by the enemy and lost about a platoon killed or wounded. The pressure of the enemy increased and the column was forced to withdraw to a place 3 or 4 miles from Gadi. The enemy greatly outnumbered our little force and it was impossible to hold out. The contingent then withdrew towards Baramulla. Brigadier Rajinder Singh managed to signal back and received a reinforcement consisting of 1 section MMG and 1 detachment 3 mortar by night. He again reorganized the column and pushed towards Uri, reaching there early morning on 24th October 47, destroyed the Uri bridge and went into defensive position, fully determined to fight the enemy to the last. In the afternoon of the same day, the enemy appeared and opened up with automatics. Very heavy fire was exchanged for 4 hours and the column was forced to withdraw to Mahura, where a stand was made until 1500 hours on the 25th of October, when the column was again forced back to Rampur, the enemy following closely. The brigadier managed to dig in the defensive position under cover of darkness and gave fight to the enemy till 0200 hours on 26th October. When forced to abandon the position because his TPS, his troops had suffered very heavily, the brigadier planned to withdraw to an already reconnoitred position in the rear. He had hardly covered a distance of 200 yards when he received an IMG burst hitting his right arm and right leg. Although seriously wounded, he continued to inspire his men to fight on and delay the enemy advance as far as possible. Being one of the last few to leave the position, the brigadier was rendered helpless and fell into the hands of the enemy, never to be heard of again. His personal example, leadership of high order, indomitable courage and determination to fight against heavy odds, born of a high sense of duty to serve, inspired the small force to fight to the last, thereby delaying the advance of the enemy hordes for 3 days. Let's that sink in. Let's open up this telecast as a tribute to the savior of Kashmir, Brigadier Rajinder Singh and his 150 troops, because the 2.5 days they bought gave enough time for an air supply, air landing of troops in Srinagar, which began on the 26th of October, the evacuation, including incidentally of the man who wrote this book, VP Menon, who was in Srinagar with the Maharaja at that point of time. It is a rare privilege for us to have with us on this telecast Brigadier Rajinder Singh's daughter Usha Parmar. She was there with the family in Srinagar when his father got the orders from the Maharaja to hold the road to Srinagar to the last man. That was the order.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.